This is the Depth Mystic Community Podcast, Episode 5, a Monologic Communologue. A monologic communologue. The dialogue of an entire community where one person has a community dialogue with himself. Maybe I should just call this show Deep Thoughts with Depth Mystic Zach Tolan. And today's deep thought is 2 modes of salvation. Suppose I feel desperate in the same way that many people have felt, and then turned to Christianity as a form of salvation. Somehow the suffering of Jesus in life and on the cross enables a kind of group identity. You can become a Christian, and a lot of people are able to solve a lot of problems in making that conversion. There's this kind of suffering that's on the cross. And undoubtedly, I find myself in need of a kind of salvation. Here I am, I'm totally outside of society, making a podcast, definitely feeling the kind of alienation that could turn a person Christian. I mean, that's what I see in a lot of Christians. I see people who are alienated from society. Like they don't fit in. And then Christianity presents the image of the perfect man not fitting in. Like even the perfect man doesn't fit in. So it's saying that not fitting in may actually be a sign of virtue rather than of weakness. And that thought somehow allows people to fit into the rejection of society. Their Christianity, if taken in that sense, means that they are a group of misfits. Now, of course, Christianity became the dominant religion in many parts of the world, which means that it can't always be all misfits if the emperor is adopting the religion. So I'm not pretending that there isn't a lot more to it. But certainly in modern times, the image of the perfect person being crucified is a condemnation of society and highlights the idea that you're not supposed to be good in society. You're supposed to be good carrying your cross. You're supposed to be good in the spiritual community, in the spirit world. But what is this other mode of salvation that I was talking about? Believing in Jesus on the cross is one mode of salvation that's widely available. But I fell into a different mode of salvation that was introduced to me by Joseph Campbell, and then I learned so much more about it from Carl Jung, and even the essay Self-Reliance by Ralph Waldo Emerson. I fell into this alternative, kind of like evil twin, you might say, mode of salvation. Imagine, instead of Jesus being the only way, the only truth, and the only life, there was some kind of trickster or mysterious man who was like the other form of salvation. Now, traditional Christianity fears the devil And they assume that the devil must be full of problems. And so traditional Christianity reassures itself that it is the way, the truth, and the life by making sure that you don't have curious thoughts about any other form of salvation. And so it casts the devil into eternal hellfire. But what if, for whatever reason, that doesn't work for you? What if you're not Christian? You yearn for more. It's like, okay, there was a misfit or even maybe a perfect person, and he was arrested and tried and executed. But for some reason, even if he was resurrected, it still doesn't feel complete. Like, I think I needed to be saved by something else. I have no other explanation for it. I have no other explanation for how I could have been saved by Joseph Campbell and the stuff he was saying. Then Jesus can't be the only way, the only truth, and the only life. There's some other way. This alternative mode is associated with Gnosticism, and the medieval alchemists also seem to believe in it. And it comes through in Star Wars, when Luke Skywalker is about to shoot the missile to try to blow up the Death Star. And Obi-Wan Kenobi says, "Use the Force, Luke. Trust your feelings." This is a transfer of your reliance on society to the reliance on yourself, on your own instincts, your own inner idea of what you ought to do, of what will work. This is what Joseph Campbell introduced me to. And that's what saved me. This white light that came and got me for 21 years, starting in 1997, this white light was sort of the God that showed up when I committed myself fully to this idea of self-reliance, of Emersonian self-reliance. And this doesn't necessarily mean kind of like rugged individualism, so much as spiritual self-reliance, allowing your own sense of right and wrong to ascend and take the dominant position in your psyche. And then when Luke Skywalker blows up the Death Star, Obi-Wan Kenobi says, "The Force will be with you always." What this means is that Luke Skywalker has had a primary experience of trusting in himself and it actually working. It actually accomplishing the thing that very few people thought possible. This is more like the mode of salvation that I experienced. I guess the issue that I have now with making this podcast is I am still sort of yearning for some kind of salvation. I'm all by myself. I'm finally giving myself a voice in society by making this podcast. But the main issue for now is what I'm calling the Monologic Communologue, the community dialogue conducted by one person talking to himself. There's still some self-doubt about whether such a thing as a monologic communologue is even possible. Like, how can a community have an enlightening conversation with itself? How is it possible that one person can actually reveal his entire world to the world without any sort of hesitation? Like, how is it that one person's able to talk into a microphone to make a podcast without experiencing some kind of guilt, shame, doubt, all that stuff? How is it possible for a monologic communologue to even happen? Am I the only one of the type of person that I am? the only one who's like me. So, in review, Deep Thoughts with Zach Tolan featured this idea of these multiple modes of salvation, namely the traditional Jesus of Nazareth mode, but then there's the alchemical mode. They called it the Spirit Mercurius. And in Jung's description, it is the unconscious. The Spirit Mercurius is the symbol of the unconscious. And so the unconscious has a kind of personality. And somehow, in alchemy, Mercurius finds his way to the very top of the salvific hierarchy, and the alchemists dabbled in heresy, probably unconsciously, in the degree to which they elevated the Spirit Mercurius above even that of Jesus. I think the key with Mercurius is there is a kind of consciousness going on. Although Mercurius symbolizes the unconscious, there is nonetheless, in alchemy, a kind of Gnostic desire to know everything. The need to know everything is thought to be where salvation will come from. It really is kind of like a philosophical solution. It's the engagement of the mind with the stuff of the world and reality, and salvation as a product of that. It's the exact opposite in many ways of Christianity, which says there's nothing you can do to be saved. You have to turn it all over to the sacrifice on the cross. But the Gnostic mode is you actually do have a special genius. Now, maybe you don't, but at least some people do. And salvation for them means imagining that that genius is their own version of Jesus. That inner genius is the form of salvation. The secondary form of salvation. It's like the Gnostic Christ. Whatever individual genius you have, it allows you to operate in the world in a special way that is custom tailored to you, that couldn't work for anybody else. Very much like each Jedi has to craft his own lightsaber. Now, a lightsaber duel, what is it? It's the encounter of two different highly developed consciousnesses. Different types of consciousness lead a person in different directions, and some of those directions are in conflict with each other. Now, a fully prepared samurai has backed up his whole life with his philosophy. But what we have is not just submitting to like the will of God. We have two mature adults, grown-ups, fighting on the battlefield. Two knights in shining armor clashing. The idea is it's consciousness versus consciousness. There's no submission. We're rather far away from the crucifixion on the cross, which is only one consciousness, being sort of opposed by the sludge, you might say, of society and authority. It's not the code of chivalry, knights in shining armor. But that vision of two samurai or Jedis in the lightsaber battle or knights in shining armor, that's actually like more compelling for me than Jesus is. Because I want to see what happens when two fully developed consciousnesses collide. That seems like the stuff that matters. Who wins that fight is basically like whose consciousness is more adapted to reality. So that's going to do it for episode 5. I'll be back next week, and I'll talk to you then.